Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we present this webinar on expert advice on liturgy music planning. My name is Angela Westhoff-Johnson. I am the Director of Music at St. Mary's Cathedral, and I am the Managing Music Editor here at Oregon Catholic Press. I will be leading you in this webinar. I also have with me Jethro Higgins, who will be assisting, providing some of our technical needs as we meet during this hour. We want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know how busy we all are, and I hope this information will be helpful to you as you prepare liturgies. Just a little housekeeping information here. If you have other programs or apps running on your computer, we recommend that you close them now, since it will affect the speed that the slides will load. And consequently, the quality of your viewing and listening will not be quite as good as it could be. So take a minute to close those if you can, if you need. Also, there's a period of our webinar at the end where you will be able to ask questions. On the right side of your screen, there's a control panel where you can submit those questions. As we go along, if you find you want to jot those down, type them right into that control panel, and then at the end of the presentation we'll answer as many of those questions as we can. If we don't have time to answer those questions, don't worry, because we'll email those to you. So if we're ready here, let's begin talking about liturgical music preparation and planning. I use both of those words because they really do mean different things. Preparation, the action or process of making ready. There's a difference. Planning is something I do very, very early on, sometimes more than a year in advance. And I know you're laughing right now, but you can never be too prepared. I always have on my desktop a document to jot down things that I may hear over the year that I want to do. And I know I'm going to forget them if I don't write them down. So that's just for the next year. So right now I've got something on my desktop that says 2015-2016. I know it seems like a long, long time from now, but it's never too early to start thinking about maybe feast days that happen in that liturgical year that aren't happening on a Sunday in this year. So always have that kind of planning ahead. I also begin my big planning, the big picture planning that I think a full year ahead. So never too early. There are some resources that you must have when we start to plan our liturgies. Of course, the Ordo is really important because it's the calendar for the liturgical year. The lectionary, your readings for the year, for each Sunday, and today's liturgy. There's a picture of one of the current today's liturgy, I believe, or the next one. When I first began my job at the cathedral, which I've now been there 21 years. It doesn't seem possible, but I feel way too young for that, but I've been there 21 years. And when I first started, I have to admit, I was kind of like a fish out of water. I had been involved in music ministry, but not in a leadership role before that. So today's liturgy was a really good friend of mine, and I'm hoping you all are familiar with today's liturgy, or what we call TL. Has great articles, wonderful music suggestions for each day, has some choral suggestions that Dr. Elaine Rendler does the song suggestions. I do the choral suggestions at the bottom of each page, 2 or 3, sometimes 4 different choral pieces. Wonderful articles, and I have it with me at the church so that, especially many years ago when I did every liturgy, there are just moments where you need, by the 3rd or 4th homily you've heard on that day, a little reading material. I feel guilty saying that, but I slip into a TL article at that moment. It really helps each Sunday to plan. but I plan annually. So my very good friend is Breaking Bread. The next Breaking Bread with readings. The next year of Breaking Bread. So as I talked about the difference between planning and preparing, what I do a year ahead is called planning. I often refer to that as planning a great dinner party. When you're thinking weeks ahead, you think about, I want to have this many people. I want to serve beef, not pork. Okay, you're laughing, I know. But it's the big picture planning, thinking about how many do I need to bring in more wine glasses? Do I need more plates for that? That's planning. It's not the very specific preparing like you prepare the table the day or two before. So the planning happens. I use Breaking Bread and start my document that has every Sunday through the whole choir season. Now, my choir, as maybe yours does, we take a break over the summer. It's a really good thing for the choir and for your assembly and for you. But so I plan sort of the choir season from the first week of September through the middle to end of June through Corpus Christi. We sing through the most holy body and blood of Christ. So I use Breaking Bread to kind of help look ahead at the whole year. Today's missal also, if you are a missal customer instead of a Breaking Bread customer, the readings there for has the psalm, the communion antiphon, your entrance antiphon, respond and acclaim, also wonderful resource for planning. When I plan, I think big picture, seasonally. So each year you want to think about adding a few new pieces to each season. This shorter season, smaller seasons, Advent, 4 Sundays long, you may add 2 new pieces each year for that season. So think Advent, Christmas. Of course, there's ordinary time 1 in there between Christmas and Lent. Lent and Christmas can feel really close together at times. Easter, and then ordinary time. So I think ahead to Advent. How many new pieces do I want to add that year? Of course, there's Christmas so close to Advent. You may have 3 or 4 new pieces for that whole seasons of Advent and Christmas. But you need to think about building a repertoire for many years. There has to be repetition, not only in the music you do with your assembly, but the music you do with your choir. So think about those different seasons. So I might think now about pieces that we can't prepare yet this year, but I want to do those next year, 2015 Advent or Christmas. So think seasonally. Think ahead as you go to conferences in the summer. If you can walk away with a piece or 2 for Advent, Christmas, Lent, and Easter, you've done really, really well at that conference. Next, think topically. There are themes or topics that reoccur throughout the liturgical year. Of course, shepherd, the good shepherd, love, Holy Spirit, Marian music. I am the music director at St. Mary's Cathedral. We do a lot of Marian music. We do a Marian concert each year, which I'll talk about a little bit later, creating some traditions in your music program in your parish. I'm always looking for Eucharistic music, both for the assembly and for the choir. We do a choral anthem after communion each Sunday, so very appropriate to have Eucharistic texts at that time. So we're thinking seasonally, think topically, and then think ritually. Initiation is such an important part of the work we do, and finding music that fits those rites of initiation. RCIA, infant baptism, both for infant baptism and adults, confirmation. There are rites of election that happen at the cathedral. Maybe you are involved in some of those as well. Finding appropriate music that works in your parish, and then I will reuse that at a rite of election. Sometimes you can weave that back into your Easter vigil, a dismissal of the catechumens that then can come back in at the Easter vigil, maybe with a different text. Your assembly knows that music, they've heard that again. It sounds familiar to them. Funeral music. Of course, we're quickly approaching November, the month when we remember the deceased of our parish in a special way. This year, All Souls Day falls on a Sunday, November 2nd. My choir does a requiem setting each year, which I may talk about a little bit later, but finding music that would be appropriate for funerals, doing that throughout the month of November, so that when you do have funerals in your parish, some of that music is familiar to the people in attendance. The sequences, there are sequences during the liturgical year where we should sing those sequences: the Easter sequence, the Pentecost sequence, and the Body and Blood, Corpus Christi sequence. Easter and Pentecost are, of course, required in the liturgy, and OCP not only has the chants, the traditional chants, but we have some other settings of these sequences. So I'm frequently looking for different settings of those sequences to incorporate into those feasts. So let's backtrack here. Think seasonally, think topically, and ritually. And that's the big picture planning. The detailed preparation is sitting with the readings for each specific Sunday. There's a picture of breaking bread with readings, or maybe the missal. Each Sunday, sit and read those readings over and over. Look at the psalm, the antiphons, the entrance antiphon, the communion antiphons. You can find music based on those texts which really enhance the liturgy, rather than just simply picking out any piece of praise, or sit with the text. It is time well spent. So you plan liturgies way ahead. If you take a look at this little box here, you will see what I hand to my choir at our very first rehearsal. 2014, 2015 lineup of music. It says each date, each Sunday, what day it is. This ordinary time, 23rd Sunday of ordinary time. This year, Exaltation of the Holy Cross fell on a Sunday. So each Sunday I have laid out here, from the organ prelude to the gathering song. Sometimes at different masses you do different music. So a piece that maybe the cantors will do when the choir is not there. A choir piece. We've been singing the antiphons, communion antiphons, for a little over a year, and I'll talk about a resource that I love a little bit later. Communion pieces. We have a large group of people coming to communion, so I usually have 2 pieces there available for us to musically weave from one to the next. A choral anthem after communion, a closing song, and then the postlude. So I find once I finish this document for the year, a huge sense of relief. It is, then I can kind of take a deep breath and relax as we go into the new season. Of course, when you're planning the Easter season and it's July, we sometimes need to make changes. And so I say to the choir, this is not a document that cannot change. But I give them maybe OT at the beginning of the choir season through Advent or Christmas. They don't need to see what we're doing already in Lent or Easter. But it is a very big relief to me when I can plan these liturgies ahead and then sit back and enjoy as we go into our first rehearsals. So aside from selecting hymns and specific pieces for the liturgy, selecting the right service music, the mass settings, is so important. It's very challenging now that we're singing the text, the new Roman Missal text, better than ever. You can start looking at other mass settings, but I love this quote from Gabe Huck from LTP. It says, "Liturgy is something sung. The assembly sings their liturgy. That is the way things are supposed to be. They don't sing during the liturgy. They sing the liturgy." They don't sing during the liturgy. They sing the liturgy. When we simply pick out opening song, closing song, and a communion piece, it sometimes feels like you pulled those out of a hat and they don't have a connection. We want the people to feel like they sing their whole liturgy. So the moments of like an antiphon or entrance antiphon, communion antiphon, the mass setting, we don't want them to tune out during the mass setting. So choosing the right one for your parish is really important. I change seasonally, and I suspect many of you do. So as we enter right now the new choir season, we continue the mass setting we've been singing through the summer. Advent, a new mass setting. I've been using Missa Ecumenica, wonderful chant, choral chant, mass, beautiful setting. OCP publishes that by Richard Prue. Then, of course, Christmas. We need to hit Christmas first. Something more triumphant. It's important as people come to those Christmas liturgies to do something they may know, something that sounds familiar to them. Some of them we haven't seen for a while. So we want them to sing with us at Christmas. Going back to ordinary time, I usually keep that through that season. And then as we go into Lent, you may consider something chant-based. OCP publishes a beautiful, beautiful setting based on the Ubi Caritas chant, Missa Ubi Caritas. Bob Hurd set the English translation of the liturgy, the Roman Missal text, to that Ubi Caritas chant. It's beautiful, and our assembly sings it very, very well. But we want the seasons to feel different, so changing your mass settings seasonally really does add to the feeling of the season. During the Easter season, will change. Of course, we do the Easter Alleluia. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. The assembly sings that really well. And at the end of that Alleluia, there's a little dressed up version called the Eastertide Alleluia 1, and there's a 2 there. Oliver Doberly came up with this short little choral Eastertide Alleluia tag. They're really, really nice. They're very short. They add to the triumph right before the reading of the gospel. I love these. If you look at, there's Alleluia, Praise to You. There's a volume 1 and a volume 2. Volume 1, it's a little more contemporary settings. I think there's 10 to 15 different Alleluias in each of these resources. Volume 2 is for choir and organ. These settings by Oliver Doberly are in volume 2. I love these books and use them a lot. So change something, dress it up during certain seasons, and I find this works very, very well. I referred to the antiphons. About a year ago, I started using these. We published these about a year ago, I think last summer, 2 different volumes of the communion antiphons for SATB choir. So these are not for an assembly to sing. These are choral settings of the communion antiphons. So the first volume is Seasons, Solemnities, and Feasts. You may begin, introducing these by doing them seasonally. Do them for Advent or do them for Lent. You can see on this particular page, fourth Sunday of Lent, there's a chanted version here for year A. There's a year C that's also unison most of the time. There's some choral parts that kind of get sprinkled in there. And then on the next page, which you don't have, but then it's when another gospel is read. So it's a little more elaborate. It's a little more challenging. These are really, really beautiful, accessible settings. If you kind of look at that first one, of course, during Lent, Christopher Walker gives us usually each Sunday of Lent a chanted version. Sometimes just a little choral writing in there. I love this first one. It's very early in the morning for me, so I'm not feeling very warmed up. But if you can see that and sing with me. The Lord anointed my eyes. I went, I washed, I saw, and I believed in God. I think I started too high, but you get the gist. You may begin your rehearsals with these. They just kind of warm up. They're easy for the choir. Some of them actually not as easy. I should retract that easy. But some of them are pretty simple and very accessible. 2 volumes of these books, Communion Antiphons, Volume 1, Solemnities, Seasons, and Feasts, and the other volume are the Sundays in Ordinary Time. Really, really have been a wonderful addition to my choral library. OCP also has a new resource of entrance and communion antiphons. You won't see that here, but the St. Meinrad entrance and communion antiphons for the liturgical season. I may have the exact title wrong there, but Father Columba Kelly has been working for years and years and years on creating these antiphons. They're beautiful entrance antiphons that are then paired with the different St. Meinrad chanted tones with Grail verses. So they can serve as your entrance song and your communion song, incorporating the antiphons for that day. Beautiful new resource that we have in modern notation. So don't get scared off from that. The one question I think I get more than any question is, how do you introduce new music to your assembly? It's tricky. It takes a long time. Choosing the right music is really important. What may work for one assembly doesn't necessarily work for another parish. So that's your job, to know your parish, the ins and outs of your parish. If you want to change their sort of repertoire, it takes a long time to do that. I assure you that if you go in to a new parish with your agenda and where you want them to be and kind of throw that at them all at once, things will not go well for you. So how to introduce new music to your assembly? Really repetition. You can never do a piece too much. Well, maybe never is too strong of a word, but you have to do it a lot for them to really learn and love a new piece of music. So you may take a few minutes before each Mass. I find that challenging. Even though I do that, I find it a challenge, in particular out here in Portland, Oregon. Wonderful place to live and to make music, but people come to Mass sometimes a little later than I think. I grew up in Iowa, and maybe I just don't have a good memory, but most of the time at the gathering song, people were in their place. But here, people are often walking in a little later. So if I introduce a new piece of music to them or a new movement of a Mass setting, they may miss it because they aren't quite in the door at that time. So do a piece of music a lot. In particular, communion time. Do a piece of music every couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 times a month, the same communion piece, for them to really get to know that piece of music. When I talked about my lineup of music for the year, that sheet that showed you each Sunday by Sunday, the very last page of that document, for my eyes only, I list all the communion pieces that we do. We often have 13 to 15 in our repertoire, and I will keep a tally of how often we do a piece of music. So what feels like a lot to you and to your choir or your cantors, it really isn't too much for the people in the assembly. So getting them to sing is really one of the most important things that we do as music ministers, and you need to do a piece a lot for them to get to know it. I like to do the same piece of music for a whole season. So as we come into Advent, this particular piece, Advent Litany and Gathering Rite, I notice at the top of that it's actually dedicated to the St. Mary's Cathedral Choir here. The composers, Michael Prendergast and Rick Maudlin, both good friends of mine. Rick works here at OCP and at the cathedral. So he wrote this piece for our community, and we began doing it a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I love this piece of music for many reasons, but it incorporates a chant, a well-known chant to the Advent season, Conditor alme siderum. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We actually have handbells that I use liturgically. I do not have a handbell choir, and I don't have the energy to begin a handbell choir, but we do use them liturgically in procession, and they add such beauty to pieces like this. So we begin with handbells, and if you don't have handbells, you don't need to use handbells. The choir sings the chant. It's offered in either Latin or in English. And we actually process in from the front of the church or the back, the entrance of the church. We begin the procession during the season of Advent and during Lent. It adds something to the beginning of that liturgy. I love the sound of the choir in procession. The people in the assembly stand and face the front of the church or the entrance of the church, and they really like that. This piece is, the people in our assembly sing it very well, but it begins with the choir singing Conditor alme siderum, Eterna lux credentium, or in English, Creator of the stars of night. And once that chant is done, the organ or piano comes in. Organ works really well with this piece as the choir begins to process in. And then the refrain is so singable. The choir should sing it the first time. Maranatha, Maranatha, come, O Lord, and set us free. And then the people sing, and the choir can add parts, and the handbell play. It's so beautiful. I encourage you to use this. Try this. It's very, very simple. The cantor sings the verses in a beautiful chanted, kind of free chant style. There's an accompaniment to that. It's not too late to introduce this one this year. This is actually in your Breaking Bread. It's number 56, and what the assembly sees is just that one little system of Maranatha, come, O Lord, and set us free. It doesn't feel overused to do this all 4 Sundays of Advent. It's a short season. It's very beautiful. So I encourage you to do that. Litanies are really wonderful ways to begin a liturgy because the people have such a very short part, and their participation, boy, they really sing to that. We have a Lenten introit offering as well. It's very beautiful. It's called Lenten Introits by Angela Flight. Really beautiful. Okay, moving on. Repetition. Communion, gotta have a lot of communion pieces. This particular piece, I'm a huge Bob Hurd fan. He just knows how to do it. His communion pieces, Ubi Caritas, Come to Me and Drink, we use them over and over. And the moment the introduction begins, the people absolutely know the piece. They sing with it without any music in hand, which is really what we want as they're going to communion. Perfect length of a refrain. It's not too long. Bob Hurd gives us 10 verses, I believe. It's number 355 in your Breaking Bread if you want to take a look at that. But 10 different verses. I think verses 6 through 10. Maybe there's more than that. But half of them are Psalm 42, 43 verses, which really appropriate any time of the year. But you want to have, I would say, 13 to 15. Maybe that's too many, but it seems to work in my situation, of pieces that your assembly really knows for communion, that when that introduction begins, they know it. Now, always, always, always sing the refrain twice at the beginning. Sing it in unison once, and then invite the people to sing with. If your choir is able to sing the parts, bring them in the second time, or maybe sing the communion piece 3 or 4 different Sundays before you ever introduce any choir parts, so that they really know, the assembly really knows what their part is. But just repetition is really important, in particular at communion. And there are times during the liturgy when you need a choir piece. Now, some people will argue that, but it's okay for the choir to sing alone. It adds to the beauty of the liturgy. People pray through listening as well. And there are times where you want to do a choir piece, but have the people sing on the refrain. One of my favorite pieces by Bernadette Farrell, I like all of her music very, very much. But this is such a gem for the choir. Restless is the Heart. I hope you know it. If you don't know it, take a look at it. Beautiful refrain that the people can sing with. It's number 683 in your Breaking Bread. The verses are a little more challenging, but a cantor or a choir can do them. Really, when they're done in 4 parts, oof, they're beautiful. But bring the people in on the refrain. They may not be able to sing it the first few times. So do it as a choir alone a couple of times before you actually invite them to join in. It's a really beautiful, beautiful piece. Restless is the Heart. My choir does 2 choral anthems every Sunday. And throughout the liturgical year, we don't really have repetition in those pieces. From year to year, there's repetition, of course. But we tend to do 1 choral piece. If we do it once, then it's gone for the rest of the season. So finding the right music for the choir to sing that is beautiful, accessible for where they are at their moment, their ability. Introducing choral music that's too difficult, I think, is such a mistake. In fact, when I first started, our choral music was unison for quite a while. Choral music can be in unison. It's actually more difficult sometimes to sing in unison, creating beautiful unified vowels, because there's no parts to kind of obstruct the sound of the vowel, right? So have your choir sing in unison. It does great things for choral technique. But we do sing 2 choral anthems each Sunday, so I'm always looking for new music. See at the bottom of this page, it says, create your own tradition. I think I talked about that a little bit back when I said for different topics, Marian music. Of course, being St. Mary's Cathedral, a number of years ago, I wanted to sing the Bach Magnificat. Challenging piece, not liturgically appropriate. How would you do that in liturgy? So we created a little Mother's Day concert, and we did the Bach Magnificat. And we put in the bulletin for weeks that you could buy your mother a virtual rose. St. Mary's Cathedral, Portland, Oregon, City of Roses. We have that theme of roses throughout our cathedral. You see that carved into many different places. And the lights have an etching of the rose through them. So buy your mother a virtual rose. I can't remember the first price. I think it was $10. And people bought their mother or a loved one a place in our program. And it said, in memory of, and many people's names were there. It was a way for people to put the names of a loved one there, and it was also a way to support the Bach Magnificat. The cost of doing that, instrumentalists were expensive, and we created a tradition of a Mother's Day concert. So each Mother's Day, people knew from year to year there was going to be a concert after the Mass. Doing it after the Mass, very quickly after the Mass, was really important also. In our busy lives, people, once they kind of go home and eat lunch and get comfy, they didn't want to come back. So we kept them there. We had coffee and donuts, and then come right back into the church and an offering of Marian music. So that was one of the traditions we created. Also, we do a requiem setting each November, the first Sunday of November. And actually, we do that as part of the liturgy. This year, doing the beautiful Duraflay Requiem. It's challenging, but there's many different settings, choral settings of the Requiem. OCP actually has a wonderful setting by British composer Andrew Wright called A Requiem of Peace, which I have done at the cathedral. It is absolutely beautiful. Of course, the Fauré Requiem, many different. Last year we did the Victoria Requiem, which is hard. Duraflay Requiem, hard, but very worth that effort to put in. So that's a tradition at the cathedral. That first Sunday of November, we also sing in a litany, a way of remembering all the deceased of our parish throughout the year. Each family is called a few weeks ago and sent a reminder that we will be remembering their loved one on that first Sunday. So those are a couple traditions we've created in our parish. You can come up with your own traditions or borrow those. They work really well. So we can plan liturgies, prepare liturgies. We know how to do that. The more we do it, but really it's important to be prepared yourself as a director. I spend a lot of time planning my rehearsal, and I'm not sure I did that in the beginning. Don't know when I started that, when I thought my rehearsals weren't probably being as productive as I needed them to be. So I spend an hour creating my lineup for my rehearsal. Being well prepared is really, really important. This right here is an article that I wrote for TL124 a number of years ago called The Well-Planned Choir Rehearsal. So it really is the key to a successful rehearsal. I'm sure you can't read all this is only the first page or a portion of the first page, so I'm going to kind of highlight some of the things I talk about in that article. How to run a successful rehearsal. So the first rehearsal of the year, this is a lineup that from my first rehearsal of this year. I send this out to the choir usually Monday morning, sometimes Monday afternoon, never past Tuesday morning. It's more about me being organized than them looking at it, but they do look at it. Sometimes I send a link to a YouTube video of a piece. Take a listen to this over the week so that when we come in on Thursday night, you've heard it before. So this particular rehearsal, if you see at the top of the page, it says choir prayer, all things are made new. OCP distributes a really wonderful book, 2 volumes of choir prayers. Volume 1, and Volume 2 is called More Choir Prayers. I love these. To begin your choir rehearsal with a prayer, very important. I think people are often rushing. I know in my situation, people come from quite a distance. Sometimes travel 40 minutes. Sometimes, if traffic's bad, an hour to get to rehearsal. And they are often running in and not relaxed. We want to be prepared mentally, physically for our choir rehearsal. So, and I usually have someone else in the choir read this. The choir gets to hear me for a couple of hours. I want to hear the voice of someone else and pass that around throughout the choir. Here's an example of, let me see. How about this one? It's called Welcoming In. Lord, we feel your welcoming in. As the master of this house, you open wide these doors to show us in. You greet us with great warmth and affection, proud that we have come with our gift of song. Like a gracious host, you put us at ease. For those of us who are returning, this welcoming is a homecoming, a coming back to the music we love, the challenge of what is to be. For those of us who come for the first time, tonight is the beginning of a new song in our lives, the kind of song that will drift through our minds and souls with the gentle prodding of God's Spirit. Song that gives new grace and dimension to our days. To each and everyone here, the Lord bids you his welcome with love. May we serve you well, Lord. Bless these gatherings of song. Bless the generous hearts who come. And then you take a deep breath and you move on and you get busy and you run the most efficient choir rehearsal that you can. So you have to be prepared with this lineup of music so that you aren't thinking, what comes next? Oh, can you find this piece? And it takes them 30 seconds or 40 seconds or a minute to find the next piece of music. You've wasted 10 minutes in your choir rehearsal, and there's not time to be wasted. So they must get their music in order before the choir rehearsal. I say on time is 10 minutes early. I'm so tempted to lock the choir room door, but I haven't done it yet in 21 years. But I'm tempted so that they can't get in because they know they're late. They need to be there early, and they need to get their things in rehearsal order. If they don't have a piece of music, which I know they do, they have that music in their box, but if they don't have it, ask for it early. So prepare the room. If you have a choir room, I'm really fortunate to have a wonderful large rehearsal space. In that space, each of them has a box that has their number and name on it. New music is given to them each week. The asterisk, if you see that beside some of these titles, that means it's new in their box that night. Now, many Thursdays, there's 2 new pieces. Now, our first choir rehearsal, it was all new in their box that night. So make sure they have all their music. That's your job. You need to be there early. I tend to get there about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes ahead of time so that I am prepared. They have their music. The room looks inviting and is well organized. I have a whiteboard that I write all of these titles on the board because they don't print this out. Not everyone prints it out and brings it with them, but the titles are on the board so they know the order. Take attendance. I think that could possibly be one of the best things I started doing a number of years ago. They need to know that you know if they're there. Now, some of our groups are smaller than others, and there are times when I don't remember, was this person there that night? Well, I can look back at our attendance. It's important that they feel accountable and that they keep coming to rehearsal. Starting on time is really, really important because if you don't start on time, they will not come on time. If you start 10 minutes late, they will come 10 minutes late. And little by little, you will keep starting late. So Some of them may miss the first song. That's okay. The next week, I don't think they do that. So start on time. Begin with vocal warm-ups. I often think that this is the biggest challenge for us as choir directors. We want to get right in there. We want to get started right away on music. But starting with vocal warm-ups is really important, especially Sunday mornings. If your choir comes together, we gather at 10 a.m. for our 11 o'clock Mass. And I really need to warm them up because Sunday mornings that's early. So this, if you look on this next slide here, here's an example of some warm-ups. Incorporate some sight singing into your rehearsal. Here's an example of a resource Christopher Walker has. It's called Sacred Rounds. Great way of beginning your rehearsals. Use your time wisely. Pace things well. You don't have to do entire songs. Do half of a song. Move on to another piece. Keeping things moving is really important. Have them stand, have them sit. Really important. Get the blood flow moving. Be positive. Be upbeat. Compliment each section at least once. Now, it can be challenging to do that, but you can find something positive and set your standards high. Let them know that they weren't doing something right. We can do this better. Let's get that consonant together. Set your standards high. They know when they can do better. And ultimately, everyone wants to do a better job. So run an efficient rehearsal, start on time and end on time. Keeping them late is not something I have ever done because I need to respect their time. They know they aren't going to be there late. They need to be there on time, and they need to know that I'm going to let them go on time. So running an efficient rehearsal, really important. So I kind of breezed quickly through the well-planned choir rehearsal. We'll send that out to you so that you get a copy of that article. And anything I can help you with, questions, send those to me as well. But now let's move to our questions section. Some of you have been writing in your questions. If you haven't done so and want to do so, please take some time and do that right now. Jethro, do we have any questions?
We've got a few questions. For those of you listening in, if you look to your right on the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a tab that says questions. Go ahead and enter your questions there if you have anything to add, and we'll make sure to answer all of them, if not now, then after the webinar. Mm-hmm. So we have a few questions that got asked several times. So the first one is, I have no experience with antiphons. Does this take the place of a communion hymn? Does it go after the communion hymn? Or is it sung as the priest receives the sacrament?
That's a great question. You can use them different ways. The communion antiphons that I was referring to by Christopher Walker, those settings, those are short choral antiphons that actually are sung just as the priest has received the Eucharist, and as the distribution begins to the Eucharistic ministers. So as the distribution begins, his are intended to just be sung by the choir. The settings that I was talking about that Father Columba Kelly has done, now that takes the place of your communion song because there are verses, the Grail Psalm verses. And so that is your entire communion song. I have been using them, just the antiphons now, and then we begin the communion song after that. Great question.
So another related question is, when do you do the entrance antiphon, before or after the lector's greeting?
The entrance antiphon is the very, very beginning of the liturgy. I'm not entirely sure what lector's greeting means. Maybe we don't do that at the cathedral, but I know some parishes will say, welcome this Sunday. Our lectors tonight I love that, but our setting is a little too bigger and we don't do that. It will go after that if you do that in your situation. So, and the ones that I was referring to, Father Columba Kelly, his could just be sung the antiphon by the choir, and then a song, entrance song, a hymn, or you could pair his chanted verses with it, and it takes the place of your entire gathering song. It's your song at the beginning.
So we've also had several people ask, will the video of this presentation and the slides be available after the webinar?
Yes, they will be available. That you can get emailed that, I believe. So you can. There's no. It's just the audio and different slides that you will. These slides you will be able to see, and then you will be emailed some of the materials that I spoke about as well.
And we have a question from somebody who's using Breaking Bread. Mm-hmm. They want to know, can a person request new music for Breaking Bread?
Absolutely you can. We value the customer's opinion so very much. So we know that Breaking Bread is a resource that we love because it's ever-changing. That can also be challenging for us in parishes when you've got your assembly just loving a piece of music and all of a sudden it's gone. And why that happens is because we hear feedback that it isn't being used as much. So we want to make space for other things. There's a survey that goes out to you, and I cannot emphasize how important it is to fill that out. In that survey, you can suggest other pieces that you'd like to go in there. Maybe it's something that came out and you want it back in there, or it's a piece that you've learned from a collection of one of our composers or artists. Yeah, send in those requests. We always listen to our customers.
So there's a two-part question here. Several people have been asking, how do you plan for a small choir or a parish that has no choir at all?
Great question. So when I first began, I think I had 4 people in my choir, which is not very normal for a cathedral, right? And we started that year, and I think by Advent I had 6 people, a relatively small choir. I think giving them music that can be accessible to them and make them grow is really important. Like I said, choral music does not always have to be sung in parts. There are some beautiful choral unison anthems. I'm not entirely sure if you mean choral music for a small choir, but if that's the question, unison things, 2-part things. Maybe it's a piece that adds some choral parts just at the end, and they feel very successful doing those. How about canon, pieces that can be sung in canon, rounds. So planning is a little different. No, you're not going to do the Bach Magnificat in your first year or when you have a choir of 10 people, but you can very successfully do some beautiful unison pieces. There's a piece in Breaking Bread, I don't know the number, it's called Be Still and Know That I Am God. Christopher Walker wrote that, and I think it is beautiful. I actually do that as a little choral anthem. It's unison, I think. If I remember correctly, it's very, very simple, but beautiful. Teach your choir how to sing with great support and unified vowels, consistent cutoffs, and make them feel success with simple music.
So there's also a couple questions about managing your choir. So how do you handle singers who miss rehearsal but want to sing at Mass?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I might not give you the right answer for your situation. In my situation, because we work so far ahead, I'm never just working on music for Sunday, that Thursday before. Absolutely not. Maybe 4 or 5 weeks we've been working on a choral piece. So if they can't make that Thursday night rehearsal, I've prepared them already, so I still have them sing on Sunday. Now if it gets out of hand and they're not coming to rehearsals at all, they will be gently and carefully asked to reevaluate their commitment. It's not working. They're not coming. You can't just come in on Sunday not having been to rehearsals, or else other people won't continue coming to rehearsal. So I'm okay with them coming and singing in on Thursday because, Sunday, if they've missed the Thursday night rehearsal, because they know the music already. We're prepared. Your situation may be a little different. However you create that sort of policy for your choir, I think it's important to follow through with that. You miss on Thursday, we are prepared and ready, and you weren't here, you're going to sit this one out. There have been times where I've had someone just not sing one song because they don't know it well enough. You may consider that as well.
And a related question is, How many in your choir read music, and how do you deal with choir members who don't read music?
We all read music, but 21 years ago, I don't know that anyone did. So a way that I knew that I didn't have the patience to teach people their notes for the long haul. I just don't understand that. So I began each rehearsal 10 or 15 minutes before doing pedagogy, doing sight singing. This is a major third. This is a major fifth. This is a minor key. This note is 4 beats. Now, people come and they don't know when you say, let's make that an 8th rest. What does that mean to them? We're going to cut off and breathe. Let's make that an 8th. Oh no, let's make that a quarter. Sometimes they don't even know what you mean. But I didn't have the patience to do that for years and years and years. So I was very, very, very intentional about basic music pedagogy. So now they do all read music. I've never turned anyone away from joining this choir. However, the pace at which we move has sometimes not worked for everyone. So the people that come in and say, I just don't read music, I'll say, let's give it a shot. Come on in. And their eyes get very big. When you're doing music, they're lost. But ultimately, you want your choir to grow and to become good readers, and through vocal exercises and warm-ups. And I just don't encourage you to play every note for your choir. It will not serve them well in the long run.
Well, Angela, we have a lot more questions, but that's all the time that we have for questions right now.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with me this hour, to be with Jethro and I, to learn a little bit more about liturgical music preparation. You can contact us for more information at sales@ocp.org. There's an 800 number there, 800-548-8749. Extension 7000. There are we'll follow up with answers to your questions, and you'll be given the link to the video and the article that I referred to. We really appreciate your support of our webinars. There's another webinar coming up the end of October on the 29th at 9 a.m. License to Sing, Navigating the World of Copyright. Please contact us for any more information. I'd be happy to share other bits of information. If you have specific questions, we'll reply to that. So let us know how you felt about this webinar. I appreciate your support. We'll be sending you a survey and really encourage you to reply to that so we can better learn what you want and need from OCP. So thank you so much. Take care.